All right, in this video, we are going to take a look at this example of the grid layout manager, or geometry manager, I should call it. All right, when I run this, here's what I get. I've got a name label here, an ID label here, an entry for that, another entry for the ID, and then two buttons, enter and go. And down here, right, I've got a text widget. So a text widget just allows you to type multiple lines of text. Whereas an entry, right, is just a one line of text. So if you need to display multiple lines of text, it's the text widget there. Okay. So up here is the standard import. I create the window, the main window, and then set the title for it. And here I just create my widgets. The name, label, the entry, the button, all that is the same as stuff that we've done before. And then here I've got the text, and that's how you create it. Okay. And then it's time for me to put the components in this grid. All right, so the first thing I started with was this label up here, name. All right, and so it was in row 0, column 0, which would be in the upper left-hand corner here. And next up is name entry grid, so that'd be in row 0, so in the top row, second column, right? So that's where the entry goes. And then the name buttons in row 0, so it's top row, and then column 2 over here. And then basically this label and entry and button I laid out in row 1, sort of the same as I did there up above. And then finally down here, I put the text in row 2. So it's in row 2 and column 0. However, this text is huge, right? It's massive. If you notice here, I did not set the geometry at all. I just kind of let the geometry manager set the size of the window on there. Because this thing is big, then what I did was I made it span 3 columns. So you can say, hey, place it in row 2, column 0, right? But let it span 3 columns. So that this text actually goes through this first column here, second column here, third column here. Okay. Now, if I don't do that, if I take this out and run it, you can see what happens. And what happened was that now these labels are massive, right? They go all the way across. And so because the text was by far the biggest widget, right, that I placed in there, these labels are usually tiny. But what it did was expand this space in column 1 so that it could fit, the text could fit in there. And so that's why there's so much space over here now. Okay. So if I tell Python to, or tkenter to, that I want this to span all 3 rows, then I get a more reasonable looking app here. But it's still kind of split these apart more than I would probably like. And that's because I have this big text in here. And if you wanted to get that exactly like these closer together, it would take a little work. And I just didn't want to put that in this first video here. But just to give you an example, if I take that text out and then run it again, here's what I get. Right? I get this the labels right next to the entries, which is kind of probably what you would prefer, and these buttons next to each other. So there is some tricky things that you have to deal with about the size of the widgets and things like that. Again, I gave you the references earlier in the previous video, right, for the grid layout, and you can see kind of all of the details there. This pad X equals 10, pad Y equals 10, just created this little space around the edge of the entry, because if you don't put it there, I just don't like the way it looks, because it's like flush up to the side of the app, which I just don't like that. It looks like, hey, does that thing run off the side or not? Okay. You can expand this as well, but it doesn't look great when you expand it. You can make it so that these things fill across the entire columns there, but again, that's going to take more work than this basic example here allows. Okay, so that is basically it on the very basics of the Grid Manager. We're not going to be constructing terribly complex graphical user interfaces in this class, just enough to kind of get the idea of how you would go about doing that. And so there's a lot more to Grid and getting things set up. So if you're interested in those details, go take a look at that reference that I showed to you in the previous video. All right, that's it for this one.